So Year 11s we have here for our second lesson, we're looking at joints. So we'll look at three types of joints here. So we can see here a diagram of the pelvis. We can see here the femur, which is joined in to the pelvis, and we can see with our spine then being joined in with the pelvis, the types of joints. So we'll go through each one of them. So we have our fibrous joints. So we can see over here in this area we have where no movement between the bones and they're held together by strong ligaments. So we do not want our pelvis being pulled away from our spine there. Then we have our cartilaginous joints. So limited movement between bones and held together by cartilage. So we can see here on our spine, we have our vertebrae held together with cartilage. And lastly, our most common joints are synovial joints. So they are free movement between our bones. They're characterized by synovial fluid. There's joint capsule and hyaline cartilage to protect the bone. So for example, we have a ball and socket joint in our hip. So in our books, I'd like us to complete the following table based on what you think. So you could just draw a little table in your book and summarize the characteristics using brackets for each type of joint, of the strength, the movement, and two examples using location. Next activity, once you finish that first one, is you need to note in your book. Have a look at this synovial joint, and you may need to research the components here. So we have an elbow joint, which is called a hinge joint. I'd like to identify and describe the different features of this synovial joint using the diagram below. So you might have to research the ligament, the feature purpose of the ligament, the hyaline cartilage, the synovial membrane, and the synovial fluid. So that's a task that you can do, is to research, maybe use a Google search and find the purpose of those. Okay, the next part of the activity is I'll show you a video. So it's only a 3-minute video, and I'll talk you through each type of synovial joint, which you will need to note in your book with maybe a little diagram.
6 types of synovial joints. The first type of synovial joint is called the plane joint or gliding joint. In a plane joint or gliding joint, adjacent bones have flat surfaces that articulate with one another. Examples of plane joints would be the bones of the wrist, or carpal bones, and the bones of the ankle, or tarsal bones. The second type of synovial joint is the saddle joint. The saddle joint is rare. The saddle joint is found between the bone that makes up the thumb, the palm of the thumb, and the carpal bone or wrist bone that sits beneath it. The bone of the thumb that makes up the palm is called the first metacarpal. And the wrist bone that it articulates with is called the trapezium. The third type of joint is called the hinge joint. And as the name implies, a hinge joint resembles the hinge of a door. An example of the hinge joint would be the elbow and the knee. The fourth type of synovial joint is a pivot joint. And a pivot joint is where one bone rotates about the other. Example of a pivot joint would be between the radius and ulna, and between the first two vertebrae of the vertebral column, called the atlas, and axis. The next type of synovial joint is a ball and socket joint. And in the ball and socket joint, one bone will have a structure that resembles a ball that fits into another bone's socket. Example of a ball and socket joint would be the hip and the shoulder. And finally, the last type of synovial joint is an ellipsoid joint or condyloid joint. And in a condyloid joint, you have a concave surface articulating with a convex surface. Example of an ellipsoid joint or condyloid joint would be the phalanges, or bones of the fingers and toes, and the sole of your foot or palm of your hand, called the metatarsals and metacarpals.
So as you can see, 6 simple types of synovial joints which you can note in your book. Alright, again, simple activities that you can complete. Just make sure you complete the required activities in your book and make the required notes for concepts delivered, and then we'll move on with the next lesson on Monday.